Elon Musk looks at says the electric car is going to work. Wait, that's crazy. It causes more pollution. We've got to go mine nickel and cobalt with these kids in the Congo. Yes, I know. Really rudimentary right now. Huge carbon footprint. But we got to start somewhere. Cell phones started out where you had to carry a briefcase, okay? Now they're this big, okay? To get to here, morons, to get to here, you have to start really big and very inefficient.
Let's talk about the State Department. State Department is planning for a massive shakeup that will reportedly involve eliminating 15% of its staff in the United States and closing up to 132 offices. In a statement to the Free Press, Secretary of State Mark Rubio explained the move, saying, in its current form, the department is bloated, bureaucratic, and unable to perform its essential diplomatic mission in this new era of great power competition. Critics of the move said the shakeup could affect the mission readiness of the State Department's advances through its proponents, or though its proponents say it will make the State Department more efficient. What are your thoughts on the reduction of size of the State Department and perhaps the closing of 132 offices, of which it's not necessarily clear if that's a split between the U.S. and global? Thoughts?
I mean, anytime somebody says to me, we're going to cut some departments of the U.S. government, or we're going to reduce the staff by 15%, my knee-jerk reaction is, okay, sounds good to me. I'm sure we'll make do. My issue with, and I like the idea of Doge, my issue is if you're going to come at government, whether it's the State Department, USAID, with a blunt instrument, with the idea that pretty much all of it's bullshit, and you get some anecdotes, or, this is not good, there's a lot of waste, and you come in and just start chopping away. I want the people that are doing that to actually understand what that complicated organism does, how it works. And because it may be that there's waste, but you need to know what kind of waste. You have to be very specific about what it is that is good and what is bad. You can't throw the baby out with the bathwater. And sometimes if you have an ideology, and I fall into this camp sometimes, this libertarian free market, ideology of government's bad, it's a necessary evil, blah, blah, blah. I have plenty of talking points that I can give you that I've given to other people because I just parrot what I've heard from the Cato Institute or the Founding Fathers. Well, government's complicated, and it does a lot of good things, and it does a lot of things. There are a lot of, selfless bureaucrats that actually do a lot of good in the world. And if you disagree with that, it's probably because you haven't done any real research. So I just worry about the blunt instrument. But then again, there's another camp that says, the only way to cut waste is with a blunt instrument because it's already become such a leviathan. So those are my thoughts.
How many people, what percentage of the U.S. population do you think could concisely define the role of the State Department?
5%.
Yeah, I honestly couldn't give you, other than the wave top level, I'm throwing myself into that category. I couldn't give you in the trenches level how it goes from the top all the way down. It's a robust, complex organization. But I will say this, your first thoughts on the cutting staff by 15% of any government agency, my initial knee-jerk is, that's a good start, boys. Let's see what else we can do here. Because I have interfaced with the U.S. government enough and the bureaucracy enough to know that, we might, sometimes 6 people sitting in a room doing the same job are not as efficient as 2 people sitting in the room doing the same job. They might be able to get more done. Having said that, I agree with the scalpel versus the blunt object approach. I mean, I would like to know how many total offices there are for the State Department. Is 132 1% of our total offices? Is it 30% of our total offices? What do they actually do? I would like to believe that the people making the decisions, perhaps Mr. Mark Rubio, even though I feel like he's just being briefed up and is kind of at this point being the mouthpiece for what's going on here, has a true deep understanding. And I feel like this is happening at a velocity where that may not be the case. And that leaves me a little uncertain here as to where this might leave us.
Yeah. I will say Rubio is less of an ideologue. Rubio is more of a practical guy. I think he's comes from a state that's done very well, managed very well. So I hope he's considered to be more thoughtful than not. So
What is this new era of great power competition? When did this is the first time being alerted to the fact that we're in this new era. What changed? What happened?
well, it's not that it's a new era of great power competition. This
The
competition.
continued era?
Yes, competition has been going on since the dawn of time. I push, you pull, or I push, you push back. And I don't care if you're a lobster or, not to quote Jordan Peterson, but you could be a lobster or a human being. It's part of evolution. It's part of the experience of being conscious. But I think that it's visible for the first time. It's very visible. You're that Zelensky, which I didn't like, but that Zelensky confrontation was shocking. But we have a president that is not afraid to tweet his thoughts and
Not always for the better.
not always for the better at all. But you've got Mark Carney now in Canada who's going to take it to Trump and ran probably on the idea that, not in my backyard. This is Canada, not the 51st state. So you're rewarded now again for amplifying your monologue. You're rewarded for being, if you can make a speech and say something that goes viral, that's good for your political career. It's good for you. It's good for your party. That's where we're at. I think that's going to have its saturation point anyway. But right now, competition, being out there with how you feel, diplomacy and protocol be damned.
Do you think Doge is in a no-win position? I feel like there's no way. For one, I'm starting to get curious about whether or not they're going to hit their $1 trillion goal.
Yeah.
But two, people are so ideologically locked in on their side of the aisle that it seems like it's impossible. It's as if one side says, no, we can't trim anything, even if it would be proven that made the government more efficient, because somehow that would be viewed as a victory.
Yeah.
The other side says we have to trim everything, but so they're a little bit more of the blunt object side, because if we don't do that, then we're not living up to our promise, and therefore we'd be handing a victory to the other side. I'm starting to get concerned that this is just going to be the classic washing machine of an empty promise that goes fucking nowhere.
Yes and no. So one of the things that anybody in power, whether they're a governor or a president, will complain about in their memoirs is that they couldn't get anything done because everything was adjudicated at every step of the way. People can criticize Gavin Newsom all they want, but, Gavin Newsom still has to deal with the city councils. He's still got to deal with the social democrats, the socialists, and communists on his city council that are anti-growth, and the trial lawyers that will sue at every step of the way. If you're trying to put a high-speed rail in there that's going to cut down on traffic, see you in 12 years and billions of dollars in legal fees. There's nothing you can do about that. Trump can write all the executive orders he wants, and it's going to be adjudicated every step of the way. So, Doge it's going to be the same thing. When you fire people like that, you have to pay them off. They have contracts. When you cancel contracts, those contracts have to be honored. They're with American companies or other companies. So you're going to have wrongful termination suits galore. You're going to have, you're going to have to honor those contracts or you're going to get sued. And so when somebody like that comes in with a blunt instrument, that's the cost of doing business. You know that this is not going to be, it's the first 100 days. They've got 3 years and 7 months. So very smart to just kind of just break all the walls down now and let the dust settle. But, anything that starts, that if you want to change the world, you're going to have people who say, This is never going to work. This is bullshit. Elon Musk didn't become the richest man in the world because he looks at obstacles. Elon Musk says the electric car is going to work. Wait, that's crazy. It causes more pollution. We've got to mine nickel and cobalt with these kids in the Congo. Yes, I know. Really rudimentary right now. Huge carbon footprint. But we got to start somewhere. Cell phones started out where you had to carry a briefcase. Okay. Now they're this big. Okay. To get to here, morons, you have to start really big and very inefficient. If you want zero carbon emissions, you got to start with rudimentary technology. And when there are breakthroughs in material sciences, we'll be able to make cars with much less of a footprint. But you got to start with a blunt instrument. So visionaries are always going to be criticized for the wake that they leave in their tracks. But please show me in history any progress that's ever been made where you didn't create wake and a whole lot of criticism. So that's what I think.
I mean, wake and criticism are not a guarantee that you're going to get to that iPhone from the original brick cellular device. What you're talking about was a success.
Remember this too. The amount of creative destruction that had to go into making this. So think about all the companies like the flip camera and everything else that went out of business because they put it all in here. And
I get it. I love visionaries. They have shaped the world that we live in. They're not always right. And I'm not criticizing Musk. You know, if you look at Doge the way it was promised, they have a year, not 3 years and 7 months. It was going to be the 250th anniversary of our country is when he was going to shut it down. It's, we'll see how it goes. I'm just like I'm saying. I am pro the idea. I want it to work. I want the scalpel to be carving fat away. I just don't want it to turn into another fucking empty promise of this is what we're going to do, and then everybody just kind of accepts the status quo. And I don't know. I hate that.
I'm right with you, and your pessimism is well placed. But
I'm a realist, not a pessimist.
You're a realist.
Yeah,
you're a realist.
Right. Radical shift in topic. You ready?
Yes.
Tariffs.
Yes.
Should tariff fees be included in prices? Amazon says it's not planning to list added tariff costs next to product prices on its site, despite speculation spanning from report that claimed that e-commerce giant would soon show new import charges. The initial report seemed to rely on anonymous sources, always a great idea, who claimed that Amazon planned to start showing how much each product's cost derived from tariffs right next to its total listed price. Amazon later denied that it was planning on adding the price. At a briefing with reporters, White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt said she had spoken with the president about Amazon's announcement and accused the company of taking a hostile and political act. President Trump also reportedly called Amazon's Jeff Bezos to express his displeasure at the planned move. What do you think about putting supposed tariff fees next to prices on consumer products?
This is Amazon's very smart way of getting even more market share because they can afford to not charge consumers, but everybody else can't. So now more people are going to go to Amazon, but they're going to show you how much they're saving you because they're such good guys. It's just because they have crazy coffers and they're able to get more. And this is the problem with tariffs is because, big companies will game that system. They'll find a way to get even bigger and the small guy loses out. So that's my thought on tariffs. I'm not an economist, so I don't have a strong opinion here. I don't know enough.
Well, take it down to just the consumer level, because I'm not an economist either. And I look at this from, I think the more educated the consumer, the better. Like I am a fan of information. Would you want to see, and I'm not an expert on tariffs, I understand they're supposed to be a short-term tool, not necessarily the longest-term tool. If there is a price increase and the company, and you can strip out the big company versus the small company, if they were able to put on a price tag, the cost of that tariff, is that a bad thing for the consumer? Is that a political act, or it was a hostile and political act?
I think overall tariffs are going to raise prices because they have to, and it's going to put people out of business. I don't like it.
Is it bad for the consumer to see that though at the cash register? Is it a political act for a company to show what the difference in price is and why? Because I ask that because as a consumer, let's say I was going to buy something.
Yeah, I like that they do it. I mean, I like that they do it.
Yeah.
I'd like to see it. I'd like to see what that does. I think it makes sense.
Why do you think the current administration views it as hostile and political?
Because it shows you how much tariffs are costing you. And
yeah, but it was their choice to impose the tariff.
Yeah, there's a philosophy behind it. Most economists disagree.
Yeah.
If it's as a negotiating tactic, fine, but I don't know an economist that thinks this is a good idea.
Well, look
So,
at it. And again, neither of us are economists. I look at this from, say I'm on the internet and I'm searching for something that I want to buy, and I find an item and I look at it and the price is pretty fucking high. And I'm able to break down. I'm like, oh, well, it's high because of this particular tariff. As a consumer, my first move is probably going to be look elsewhere for something that may not have that, which if we're talking about bringing jobs back, and I really wish people would put a more reasonable timeline on how long production and industry is going to take to come back into the U.S. It's not going to be like this. It's going to be probably 5 to 10 years before we have infrastructure, equipment, training, finding, like, holy shit, that's going to take a long time. But if I looked, let's say it was at 2x the cost of the product, I would probably look for something, maybe something reasonable or similar that was made in the U.S. that could, you know what I mean? So I guess it could be viewed as political, but also if you are trying to drive business back to American businesses, I could see that from the consumer perspective, actually doing that as well.
The argument would be that Trump looks at the world as winners and losers. He looks at trade deficits and says we're losing this. That what I've heard is that they don't take into account the United States as a service economy. It's not that we're not manufacturers anymore, but we do export things like ideas and tech, and these are all service things, entertainment. So we've been in a service economy for a long time. I don't know if you want your kids working in a factory. I want my kids coming up with an idea and building a business around it.
Sure.
And as we get more automated, I don't even know if we're going to need people in factories. So I think that the days of the factory have been romanticized. But you're right. Main Street's lost in globalism, I don't know. Time will tell.
If you saw,
Andy, I've got to run because I have to go do a podcast with Eric Weinstein.
it's Steen, but it's not a big deal. He really likes it to be close to Epstein. I've heard.
Yeah, he likes me to say Weinstein. So, and I love doing this, and I'll do this anytime you want. I was going to reschedule, but I didn't want to miss this because it's too fun.
Yeah, no worries.
And I keep the great Eric Weinstein waiting, and then I blame it on you. He won't do your podcast.
Maybe I'll just kidnap him and he won't have a choice. He can do the podcast, and depending on how it goes, maybe I'll start sliding him some tools that he can use to undo his restraints.
Well, he, like me, gets a little giggly around alpha males like yourself who are 6 foot 220, and we're DevGru guys and now black belts in jiu-jitsu.
Can you do me a favor and not say any of those things to him when you're describing me?
I'm not done with your resume. I'm not done with your resume. Who can fly a helicopter and a plane and jumps off of cliffs in a squirrel suit.
I'm basically Tom Cruise.
Full head of hair.
Yeah, I'm basically Tom Cruise.
But you're a taller, more robust Tom Cruise. You're a juicier Tom Cruise.
Have you ever seen him in person?
I've done a reading with him, and I've had a 1.5 hour conversation with him.
Fuck me running. He's tiny.
He's a small man.
That's all. That's all I have for today.